Good morning. My name is Vanessa Green. I'm the Executive Director of the Network of Oregon Watershed Councils, and we want to thank you for joining us today for our regular webinar, November this time. We are sponsored for this endeavor by the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and we want to say thank you to them for that support. And joining us here today is a panel of experts on collaborations and how to build them and how to do them effectively. Best practices and lessons learned. This session is going to be facilitated by Courtney Schaff of OWEB, and I'm going to turn the session over to her so that she can make introductions and coordinate the session from there. Before I do that, I want to remind you as attendees that you are automatically put on mute. You are welcome to ask questions throughout this session, and there's two ways to do that. You can put a question into the chat function, and I will read your question out for you when there's a good break in the conversation. That seems to be the most popular method. You are also welcome. There's a little icon in your drop-down menu here of a raised hand. You can click on that raised hand, and that will alert me that you want to ask a question, and then I can manually unmute you, and you can use your voice. So either way, I will keep my eye out for questions, and you'll hear my voice without my face interjecting every once in a while. But I am wishing you all a very good conversation. Courtney, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Vanessa. And good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here with this really is an amazing group of panelists that I really am inspired by, and super excited for all of you to hear a little bit about them and their stories. My intent today is to have them do most of the talking and to just kind of facilitate what we have as a series of questions, which will enable each of them to tell a little bit about their approach to collaboration and what they are achieving. So I'm going to ask them each to just do a quick introduction of who they are and what collaboration means to them. I'm then going to give just a really brief background about OWEB's approach to organizational collaboration grants and kind of our relationship with each of these amazing panelists. And then we're going to jump into a series of 4 questions we have. And for the panelists, when we get to the first question is when I will bring up the slide that you guys sent me. So for just this quick round of introductions, if you guys would just each give your name, who you work for, and what you think collaboration means to you, that would be great. And we'll start with Jessica.
Great, thanks, Courtney. Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica McDonald. I'm the director at Greenbelt Land Trust. But the hat that I'm wearing today is with the Confluence Center here in Corvallis, which I'll be talking more about. So the question of what does collaboration mean to me, I guess, you know, there are a lot of different forms of collaboration. We're all involved and steeped in different ways that we collaborate and partner. But when I think about like the North Star of what deep and impactful collaboration is, for me, it's really an outcome of a culture that embraces risk and creativity. And it is an outcome of long-term trusted relationships. And it's an outcome of an abundance mindset. And I think we use that term a lot, but for me, it means, you know, if I win, you win, we all win. It's where we're lifted out of a competitive framework, open to share knowledge freely and both freely and generously, because we know that our purpose really extends beyond our individual organization. So I think that's my definition. I'll pass it off to the next person.
Gosh, that was a great way to start. Thank you, Jessica. Send it over to Sydney.
Good morning. I'm Sydney Nyland, and I'm with the Upper Willamette Stewardship Network. Let's see, why collaboration is important to me. I just think that so many of the problems in our world stem from, you know, that ethos of individualism and competition and self-interest. And I think that the only way we're sort of gonna get out of this situation is by doing it together. And by doing it, you know, sort of like what Jessica was saying, in in a way that builds trust and community and collaboration. I can't think of any other better way to spend our time, and it's just much more fun to do things together. So that's why I like collaboration.
Thanks, Sydney. Abby.
Good morning, everyone. I am Abby Forrest, and I'm the watershed coordinator for all of the Wasco County watersheds. We have 5 here, and what collaboration means to me is I actually spammed one of my coordinating board chairs, and he had like one of the best answers, so I'm going to repeat it. But what it means to us is the people that care about their own objectives is when we take the time to learn about somebody else's objectives and their projects, and how we find ways that we can all leverage support and resources so that we all have successful outcomes. So I think it definitely goes with what Jessica and Sydney said.
Thanks, Abby. And Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. Brian Barr, I'm the Executive Director of the Rogue River Watershed Council, which has been a watershed council for just 5 years, and we'll get into that story. Almost 6 now, but we'll get into that story a little later. I think the other panelists have hit on what collaboration means really well. I'll just draw maybe a bright line over something that I think is important. Again, trying to get the kind of work done either on the ground or in the community that raises or moves the needle is hard work, and it's always done better in partnership or some sort of collaboration. That collaboration should really leverage what each of the organizations involved in that collaboration excel at. We're all really good at something or some things. Very few organizations, if any, are really good at all things that are needed to do important work. So to squeeze the most out of the lemon, you really got to have at least several hands doing the squeezing, and that's what collaboration is for me.
Well, great. Thanks. What a great way to start, all 4 of you. Thanks for those insights. I guess I didn't fully introduce myself. I am Courtney Schaff. I am the Interim Business Operations Manager at OWEB. I have been at OWEB for almost 15 years, and collaboration has really been one of my passions at OWEB, and I have had the, I guess, luxury of getting to kind of create and brainstorm what we call our organizational collaboration grants, and have managed them since we started them back in 2013. And these grants have funded a variety of organizational collaboration work across the state. Actually, 3 of our 4 panelists have received grants at one point in time to do collaboration. The Wasco just did it all on their own because they're so cool. And so it's been really fun to see the evolution of this work and see how different organizations have started in their own communities collaborative work and grown that vision with and without OWEB funding. And so really the goal and objective of today is to dive a little bit deeper into the approach each of these 4 organizations has taken into collaboration, because each one is very, very different in who they're working with, what their end goal is, and what the organization or partners look like. So I'm going to share my screen. I asked each panelist to create one slide. And the first question is asking them to each give a brief overview of their organization, who they are collaborating with, and how that collaboration helps them, or if they're in the process of building a collaborative partnership, how it will help them achieve their goals. So the order for the first question is going to be Jessica, Brian, Abby, and then Sydney, just so that you guys know what's coming. And now I will share, and there it goes. It worked.
Great. It's always nice when it works. Thanks, Courtney. So again, I'm here representing the Confluence, which is a collaborative of 6 organizations at this point, and Greenbelt Land Trust, Marys River Watershed Council, the Benton Soil and Water Conservation District, Institute for Applied Ecology, Cascade Pacific Resource Conservation and Development, long name, and Corvallis Environmental Center. And I think there might be a few of our partners maybe on the call today. So together as a partners, we have been working collaboratively on this project for about 6 years, molding the idea of the Confluence, which at its core is a shared space center. It's under development. Come down and see it in downtown Corvallis. If you know the area, it's on 2nd Street downtown between Robnett's and the toy store. And you know, what is collaboration help us achieve our goals? What is it for this group? We're going to get into more of the mechanics of that today, but I think overarchingly, we have come to appreciate that the benefits of collaboration through co-location kind of continue to unveil themselves and grow. Courtney, you were saying, you know, maybe speak about your end goal. I'm like, you know, in some ways, I don't even know what the end goal is. It keeps moving forward because opportunities continue to rise. But at its core, the benefits and the goals of our collaboration and co-location, one is maximizing financial resources. That can never hurt, right? We have nationally an average of $25,000 a year in savings for each organization that is within a shared space center. So of course that money can help go to further our mission and goals. Through this co-location, we're also able to expand our own reach and impact of our programs through shared services and administration. And then thirdly, stronger voice and brand opportunities for each of us, organizations that are part of the Confluence, but also collectively. And through that voice and brand, we can really reach a broader audience. So what you see here are the values that we have adopted as part of the Confluence. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other sort of approved pieces that have built the structure and framework of the Confluence as we go through the different questions today. But I think I'll pass it off to the next person.
Thanks, Jessica. Okay, Brian.
Great, thanks. So the collaboration, I think that the part of the collaboration that I'm going to focus on is sort of looks mostly backwards in time. The grant that Courtney referred to that collaborative grant that resulted in the Rogue River Watershed Council that work started in about 2017, maybe 2016, with 5 of the 9 watershed councils in the Rogue Basin getting together to talk about something collaborative. That ended in a merger of 4 of those 5 organizations. So 5 years ago, there were 9 watershed councils, or 7 years ago, there were 9 watershed councils in the Rogue Basin. Now there are 6. And I tried to outline a little bit of kind of about what we're up to on this slide. Again, the Rogue River Watershed Council covers roughly half of the entire Rogue Basin. It's about 1.6 million acres. It's most of the upper Rogue and much of the middle Rogue. The area in which we work covers the northern part of Josephine County and most of Jackson County, and it overlaps pretty directly with much of the Medford District of the Bureau of Land Management and the Rogue Siskiyou National Forest. And I think that overlap in particular provides us with all kinds of opportunities to partner with those entities, the counties and the large federal land management agencies, as well as many others. And it allows us to really focus on those areas, the habitats, the critters, and limiting factors that are of the highest priority in the upper and middle Rogue. And that, thinking about those priorities and generating that focus and being able to engage with agencies and jurisdictions, I think is one of the big wins that the merger that formed the Rogue River Watershed Council allowed us to create. And so just without giving too much away, I'm from the upper Midwest, a large city in the upper Midwest, and the bottom line ends up being pretty important to me. I think it's really safe to say, hopefully those numbers in that last bullet are compelling to folks, but in just the year 2020, we were able to implement on important restoration projects, roughly $300,000 in cash and about $75,000 of in-kind support. And again, that's just 2020. And that funding and in-kind support is not coming from a small number of places. That's probably the result of partnerships among 8 or 9 different organizations or agencies with the Rogue River Watershed Council. Maybe to put a finer point on that, so $360,000 is somewhere just north of a third of our entire operating budget. So that's a pretty healthy chunk of our operating budget coming from a relatively large number of partners to do a lot of good work around that 1.6 million acres.
Thanks, Brian. All right, Abby.
Hey everyone. So the Wasco County watersheds, they are housed together with the Wasco County SWCD. I am employed through the SWCD. And in Wasco County, although there is an overarching coordinating board that was developed back in 2014, there are still 5 very active councils throughout the county. And when the coordinating board was developed and kind of established, they developed a countywide action plan. But one of the main goals of the coordinating board was to make sure that each of the individual councils don't lose their unique culture. Wasco County is a very diverse county where up in Mosier you have a lot of the ecological systems, like stuff that you would see in the valley, and then all the way down into South County that is very dry, high desert. And so what the coordinating board tries to do is to handle the administrative work that is required to meet our capacity grant requirements, but to also act as a platform to communicate the work that's being conducted throughout the state, or throughout the county, excuse me, and to share that with each of the individual council members, but also use it as a platform to discuss with the SWCD. And you know, although the projects are developed at the local council level, they are supported by the coordinating board and the SWCD. And so I guess in my slide is a whole bunch of people, and I didn't really know how to put it together with, you know, who we work with without it getting too clustered. But along the outside are just the folks in Wasco County that we work with. You know, a lot of them are local agencies, as well as all the way up to the state and our state legislature. But it also comes down to our landowners, and you know, those essentially are the folks with the boots on the ground, and then all the knowledge of, you know, what is actually happening in the watersheds. And so you know, at our council meetings, all these folks that are listed are usually available and providing input on discussions.
Great, thanks, Abby. And Sydney.
Perfect. So yeah, I looks like network fell off there. Sorry.
Oh, whoops.
So no, that's okay. Clearly that was my fault. So I chose this photo because I wanted to just highlight that, especially as we're building the network, one of our main focuses is on building relationships between people and having fun together, and sort of really investing in that foundation that will make future programs, I think, come easier to us. So the Upper Willamette Stewardship Network is 6 organizations. It's the 4 watershed councils of the Upper Willamette. So that's the Coast Fork and Middle Fork Willamette Watershed Councils, the Long Tom and the McKenzie Watershed Councils, as well as the Friends of Beaufort Park and the McKenzie River Trust. So we work together on a number of different sort of priority areas, and those are sharing staff and resources, more diversified and sustainable funding, as well as outreach and communications, diversity, equity, and inclusion, tribal engagement. And we're also working to build a more regional approach to environmental education. And then, of course, work on restoration and stewardship. So looking at a more regional level, you know, where can we work together to make a bigger impact in some of those key areas where, you know, one organization is maybe not able to make a big difference.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now let me stop my sharing so everyone can see your guys' amazing faces again. I can't, hopefully they can see you. What I see is that they're seeing the slide introduction. Hopefully the audience can see you guys again. So maybe audience, if anyone can put in the comment box that they can actually see their panelists, that would be great. Hopefully. All right, so we're gonna move on to the second question. The order is gonna be Brian, and then Sydney, and then Abby, and then Jessica. So if you guys could tell us about the collaborative structure that you're using and why that structure works for you and some of the opportunities that it has created and some of the challenges that you face. So again, Brian, Sydney, Abby, Jessica.
Perfect. Thanks, Courtney. So again, I want to draw particular attention to a little disconnect between who was involved in the collaboration that I'm talking about and then the result of the collaboration. And I'll do my best with this question because really it was the collaborators that got to yes on a merger that hired me to do the work after the merger. So I wasn't, although I was around and doing stuff in the Rogue Basin and hearing about the collaborative effort, I wasn't really a part of it. I just picked up the collaboration and moved forward with it. And I'm still here, so I must be doing an okay job at that. But again, Rogue River Watershed Council formed in early 2015 as the result of a roughly 2-year negotiation among ultimately 4 watershed councils that decided to merge their organizations entirely and step forward as one single entity. Those organizations, just in case you're interested, were the Stream Restoration Alliance of the Middle Rogue, formerly the Middle Rogue Watershed Council, the Bear Creek Watershed Council, the Little Butte Creek Watershed Council, and the Upper Rogue Watershed Association. And painting a broad picture, I think it's safe to say that the boards of those organizations and frankly the staff of those organizations recognize that each of them as relatively small, very thinly staffed, relatively administrative heavy organizations were all struggling to really engage the communities in which they worked and really develop high priority projects. And so that's why the merger made sense to them. The idea being that as one entity with roughly the same number of total staff people, which is exactly where we're at now. Prior to merger, there was probably 4-ish, maybe 4.5 FTEs across those 4 organizations. And right now, the Rogue River Watershed Council is 5 staff. But on a percentage basis, the amount of time spent on administration now is a whole lot lower. And Rogue River Watershed Council has 3 staff plus a small amount of my time that are steeply entrenched and highly skilled technically. So steeply entrenched in technical work and highly skilled in order to deliver that work. So I think looking at the benefits of what the merger has afforded this chunk of ground in the world down here in Southwest Oregon, this centralization has led to the ability to have highly specialized, highly technical skills on staff. That has resulted in really refined focus with the Watershed Council really figuring out highest priority areas to work, reaching out to landowners in those areas to develop projects that from our perspective, move the needle where we want the needle to move. We're generating relatively large scale projects that are pulling in resources to deliver those projects from a wide variety of places, wide variety and high diversity of places, which speaks to what I would call expansive partnership arrangements, which run, and those arrangements run way more than just the dollars and cents needed to develop these projects. Those partnerships also delve into technical aspects that we can't cover here at the or don't have the expertise to cover at the Watershed Council. So there's a word that you're going to probably hear from me over and over again if you haven't already heard it over and over from me, and if you ever run into me at a conference, I'll be saying the same thing. I think it all really comes down to focus, focus, focus. And again, the merger here, the collaborative effort here, has given us that chance to get really refined and specific and laser-like in terms of our focus. That creates challenges. I'll be real frank that oftentimes you see that, but the flip side of the positive is the negative sides relate to this thing on the other side of the coin. And I would say our biggest challenge is maintaining that focus in the face of lots of other folks in the region with experience with the organizations that merged to create the Rogue River Watershed Council, or with experience from other watershed councils, would like us to work on a small project over here or a big project over there. And if those projects are outside of our focus areas or sit outside of our expertise, we've had to get comfortable with saying, no, we're not going to work on that. We're not going to do that. We can maybe make a reference to somebody else that we think can help you on topic X, which is outside of our focal area or outside of our wheelhouse from an expertise perspective. And saying no is hard. You could ask any one of my 11 board members here at the Watershed Council. They don't like hearing that the executive director of the Rogue River Watershed Council told the landowner no. But at the same time, that spreads you thin, and you lose your focus that way. And then once you start losing your focus, it's my perspective that you slow down the rate at which that needle is moving.
Thanks, Brian. That was great. So it just changed again. Okay, let's move to Sydney. Oh, we lost Sydney.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We lost your visual.
Yeah, everything on my end just went like white. There we go.
There.
You're back. I can see you now. That was weird.
Actually, before we jump to Sydney, this is Vanessa. There's two questions that have come in for Brian. Could I field those questions and then have us go to Sydney?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, Brian, the first, when the councils merged, did they maintain separate offices or are they all together? If all together, how big of an area do you now cover?
So it was a hard merger. We are all in one spot. We selected a relatively central place and made sure that the name Central was in the name of the city that we sat in. So we're in Central Point, which is in the Bear Creek area. It's at the north end of the urban center in Southern Oregon. We still cover the exact same territory, for lack of a better term, that the former councils worked in. So from a geographic perspective, it's the four watershed councils areas all merged together with one central office in Central Point covering that territory. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. The second question is, Brian, can you speak to how you pared down 4 boards of directors to 1? How did they decide on the stakeholders to be involved?
So that's a great question. What I know about that is that as the negotiations started, there were 5 watershed councils involved, and each council self-selected 3 representatives to be involved in the negotiation process. One of the councils, for reasons that were important to them, and then clearly obviously important to the rest of us, decided that merging wasn't in their best interest, and so they withdrew, and that left 12 individuals, 3 from each of the 4 remaining watershed councils, to hammer out the details, of which were many, for the merger process. They all voted on it. The 4 individual boards approved the merger. The Rogue River Watershed Council became an entity unto itself. And then it just so happened, although I don't think it was required, but it just so happened that the 3 board members from the merging councils all stayed on, and that became the initial board of the Rogue River Watershed Council. And then there's been some attrition and addition in the time since. I don't think, so when we started out, there were 12 directors for the organization, and I don't think we've quite been up to 12 since. We're pretty consistently around 10 or 11. We can be as big as 19. So at any rate, they sort of self-selected stakeholders that would be that made sense. They did make an effort to spread sort of the community groups that would be represented on the board to the greatest extent possible. But I don't think that was the first priority. I think the first priority was making sure that there were 3 individuals on that initial board from each of the 4 merging councils.
Thanks, Brian. All right, now we'll jump to Sydney. So to remind the question, I'm going to just so tell us about the collaborative structure you're using and why that works for you, and opportunities it's created and challenges.
Perfect. So the collaborative structure that we are using is the impact network model, and that was developed in partnership with Converge, and that sort of came together before I started. And so the idea of that is to really focus on a core team, and our core team is made up of the executive directors of each of the 6 member organizations. And so that structure then is sort of the guiding governance body of the whole network. One of the challenges that posed is that because so much focus was put on the executive directors and building relationships between them as individuals, that there wasn't a lot of network integration or understanding at the staff level or the board level. And it also made us really, it made a big challenge when we went through turnover, which happened about the same time as I started. One of the executive directors turned over. And it was a big realization that, okay, this model, while it's great, it's lacking that resilience to be able to deal with turnover. So one of the first things that I did was to start developing project teams. So the sort of the network core team is like the center, and then we have different project teams that correspond to each of the collaboration areas I mentioned earlier. So for example, we have a project team that looks at outreach and communications. How do we elevate each other's voices? And the cool thing about that structure, one of the opportunities it provides, is that our staff and even some board participate are able to come together and build those relationships at other levels, but also it brings the people to the table who really care about a specific issue or project and who have the most knowledge, so that we're able to create really fun, innovative, and better programming. So that's one of the opportunities. I think another one of the really amazing opportunities provided the focus on the core team, making sure that the decision makers were at the table and building strong trust-based relationships based on, reciprocity and generosity, is that 2020 has been a year of crises after crises, right? And so, with the pandemic and the wildfires, we were really able to check in with each other, see what different organizations needed, and really able to mobilize resources and staff and capacity to help support each other so that we could deal with those crises, so that we could make sure that we weren't having to make any, so that each organization could independently weather those different storms. I think that's one of the really great benefits we've seen so far from that network approach.
Thanks. That's just a positive story to end on there, to lift each other up. That's great. All right, Abby, if you want to tell us about the structure that you guys and some of the opportunities it's created and some of the challenges.
Yeah, so I kind of explained our structure with the 5 watershed councils and the coordinating board in the previous question, but the SWCD is the fiscal sponsor of the watershed councils because we do not have legal status of our own. And we wanted to maintain the relationship between the councils and the district that was established back in the early 90s. But also by having the district be our fiscal sponsor, it allows the councils more freedom to do more and be creative without the legal aspects of weighing down our momentum. So the SWCD staff, actually, there's one technician that it participates in each watershed council, and so they're kind of designated for each specific council that help develop grants and help provide some technical aspects for each potential project. And all of the staff at the SWCD are NRCS certified conservation planners, and so that really helps with partner agencies and just great resources that a individual watershed council might not know about. And so one of the great terms that Pat Davis, our coordinating board chair, likes to throw out there is cross-pollination. And he says he uses that for the partnerships that we use people from a wide variety of all of our local organizations so that we can help understand each other's goals. A lot of our partner agencies are, once they have retired, a lot of them are watershed council members. So these are local people that continue to work in their watersheds and want to enhance, any effort that the councils are making. And I think a challenge, it's hard to describe challenges because you want to just brag on yourself all the time and say how awesome you are. But one thing with the 5 councils, we've never struggled with prioritizing a project, but we've also tried to figure out a way to balance projects and how to secure funding for each project without losing momentum. Because each council develops their own projects, they have their own cultures and areas in the watershed that need improvement, but one is not more important than the other. And so we try to balance, through our different resources and different funders, how to keep everything going without losing that momentum.
Thanks, Abby. All right, Jessica.
Great. So for the confluence, the structure has really been a process we've had, as I'm sure everybody here, different parts of that evolution. Initially, we formed without any formal agreement. It was very sitting around lunch conversations together and sort of co-creating this idea. It was really one point person per organization, so it was a really small group. And Greenbelt Land Trust sort of took the lead on contracts and stewarding that at that point. Then further down the road, there was a need to formalize the partnership, and especially since we were committing financial resources and investments each, we decided to create a cooperative agreement. And so that was in place and still is actually, but right now we're in the next stage of our evolution, which is forming a new nonprofit. And so we're not merging together. So this is kind of a separate model, which is we're forming another, we are all part of a new nonprofit that is forming called the Confluence. And this was a long-term discussion to get to this point. We brought in a consultant specializing in the creation of collaborative shared spaces and really thinking about what kind of governance model we want. Why is a nonprofit the right approach for us? And the benefits and opportunities of this model, I think, were, it creates a clear mission parameters that we all keep in focus in front of us as we are all bought into this new nonprofit. There is a creation of a community asset that is separate from any of the individual partners. The focus is really on the long game because, again, partners may come and go out of the confluence over the coming decades, but the confluence itself is a community asset, and that's a long game vision. And then also risk is held by a separate entity. There's always a nice opportunity to put risk at arm's length and liability a little bit. So from the challenges side of things, of course, added complexity in forming a new nonprofit. Just the fact that we have the policies and bylaws and forming a 501c3 and all of that good stuff. We also have one of our partners who's been with us since the beginning as a core partner of the Soil and Water Conservation District, which is a quasi-governmental entity. So forming a new nonprofit together with one that is not a 501c3, we have learned a lot. And if you ever have an interest in finding out more of the ins and outs of that, I'm sure that we could be a resource for you. So also just, I think the time commitment, work by committees, and as a collaborative, it's a slower moving ship, I think, than if one entity just took the charge and it was a different collaborative model. But of course, there are opportunities in those consensus decisions as well. So on the day-to-day side of things, we have monthly steering committee meetings across all of the partnerships. I think somebody else, Sydney might have mentioned this, just the opportunity to have staff and board involved in that is really important. So we've extended that core inner circle out and having more people involved so they can be liaisons and representatives from the organization, but also report back to their individual organizations. And I think I'll also mention, as Sydney did, the action teams or committees that have formed. That has really blossomed out of that core group, and now we have committees on equity, diversity, and inclusion. We have marketing committees, we have communications committees, and that has really grown over the last couple of years. So that's a little rundown on some of the challenges. Really, they're all opportunities, though, right?
That's great. All of your comments are clearly connected, but also build off each other and are unique. So thanks for sharing. Vanessa, any questions before we move on?
There are a couple of questions. I will share that there's a couple of questions that came through for Brian, but then it was really time to talk to Sydney. So those two, I'm going to ask you to be patient, and we'll catch him at the end when we're doing more general stuff. Here's a question for Jessica. We created a similar model at the Curry Watersheds Partnership where each of the organizations have a role within the nonprofit and maintain control of that. Feel free to reach out if you want to chat about your experience or have any questions. We are 1 SWCB and 2 watershed councils.
Great, thanks for sharing.
And then that's it.
Okay, great. All right, so our next question in the order is going to be Sydney, Abby, Jessica, Brian. Describe any collective agreements that you've developed and used during your collaborative work. They can be from any time in the process, and describe why the agreement was developed and how it maybe was used, or maybe one critical point where your partnership had to really use that agreement in order to keep moving forward. So again, Sydney, Abby, Jessica, Brian.
Thank you. So yeah, we have one agreement. Oh, it says I may be experiencing network connection difficulties.
We can hear you.
So okay, all right. If you can't, let me know and I'll see if I can fix it. So yeah, so we have an MOU which was developed before I came on, but it's a really high-level document. It's really short. It's just a page, and it's really aspirational. It's focused on values and how we want to work together, looking at the commitment to working together, to developing shared interests, but it really doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of, okay, this is how we're going to do it. There's not a lot of legalese in that document. So I think that's been really helpful, sort of to guide the network as we look at, okay, how do we want to interact together, and just to establish that basic commitment of working together. now, with the support of OWEB, we are working to develop some bylaws. And so that has been actually a huge challenge. I'm really glad that Courtney pushed us to give ourselves some extra time for that. So like, oh, we could do this in a year, but that is proving more difficult. And I think one of the reasons is that because there's such commitment to the idea that the foundation of the network is relationships and trust and flexibility, that there's a lot of hesitance around developing, you know, a lot of structure and rules that could in fact undermine the dynamic, the existing dynamic of the network, which people feel is working really well. And so what we're struggling to do right now is to find a balance for that document, whether we call it bylaws or what, but find a balance that expresses our values, but also, you know, how we operate, what are our, you know, principles, and to provide guidance for our future selves and our future partners that we don't know what the network is going to look like in the future. So yeah, so that has been an interesting challenge, I think a really useful process of figuring out what's important to the members. So we have till March to get those done. I hope we get to it.
Thanks, that's great insight. Okay, Abby?
Yeah, so the watershed councils have a memorandum of understanding with the SWCD, and this was developed back in 2014, 2015 area. And it's not super elaborate, but you know, it is 4 pages, and it kind of describes the purpose of the MOU, as well as it provides background in the area that it covers between the coordinating board and the watershed councils and the SWCD, and it outlines the fiscal sponsorship of the SWCD, as well as our roles and responsibilities, and just stating that both of these parties mutually agree that this is how we'll conduct business with the common vision and a common goal. And the MOU, we approve it and I guess reevaluate it every biennium at the beginning of the capacity grant. And so it gives a chance for the coordinating board and the SWCD to look back through and say, yep, you know, we're still on track and this is what we're doing. And then the watershed councils and the coordinating board also have bylaws that are reviewed every biennium as well. They were adopted back in 2014. And then we, back in 2019, February of 2019, we looked through and updated it because, you know, 5 years have gone by and there's been some turnover and some changes, but it outlines the responsibilities and roles of the coordinating board and the watershed councils so that, you know, we have a clear mission, and it gets into the pretty nitty-gritty as far as the areas of the watershed councils, the appointees and the rules. All of our watershed council members are appointed by our local county commissioners, and so they serve 3-year terms, and a lot of that is outlined in these bylaws, as well as meeting schedules, our officers, some of the decision-making processes, and there's a little of that. And then it kind of breaks down the responsibilities of the coordinating board. So it's a large document, and I'd be happy to share it with anybody who's interested, who's going through this process.
Thanks, Abby. And I would say, from knowing definitely the process you guys have gone through, it's one of the things I really appreciate is you guys do regularly check in about and make sure you're on the same page. Because it just keeps open communication, which has been nice to see. Okay, Jessica.
Great. So maybe I'll just start off with the cooperative agreement and the bylaws that I already mentioned that are forming before we formed the Confluence nonprofit, and then now with the nonprofit, the bylaws that are governing it. So the cooperative agreement has been updated over time, and you know, the question of how it was developed, one of the things that I'm looking back both fondly and also with laughter is how many lawyers we had involved, just because of the number of different entities, but then also an independent attorney that wasn't associated with any of our organizations. So we had about 7 different attorneys reviewing the cooperative agreement and the bylaws. So some of that, the bylaws, I would say, was almost a year process to get from start to a place that we all agreed on. The cooperative agreement, we wanted to start out with something, as I said before, once we started to have investing financials each and saying that we are all putting in a certain amount of money into this effort, we wanted to have that agreement in place. And we included in that also an opt-out clause. I think most bylaws and agreements always have that, but that was really important for us. And who can come into the partnership is a big part of this question. And we're still working on that. That's a big part of our work right now. We left the door open for additional, you know, both within the cooperative agreement and the bylaws, additional core partners to join that. But we haven't laid out the process of how we decide that. What is the decision tree model to be able to sort of build consensus on who additional partners are. And then also, you know, built into both of those policies is who is the administrative manager. For the bylaws, again, unique to us, because of having the Benton Soil and Water Conservation District involved, they were not able to actually sit on the board. So we just worked with all of the attorneys of the different groups to think about a different structure. So we could still form a new nonprofit, but have the SWCD have a stake in that organization. And so in the end, we were able to create a governance committee in those bylaws that really puts the power of everything from like passing budgets to approving leases, overseeing staff, which oftentimes would be within the board's purview. So it's like an executive committee in a lot of ways, the governance committee. And that is just a workaround that we were able to figure out to be able to have sort of equal distributed stake and buy-in from each of the organizations in the bylaws. But that was, again, months of like trying to work that out. And I will just say one thing that I remember now is we had then, we decided at the beginning, let's not put the governance committee, let's create a governance committee charter and invest all of the roles and responsibilities in that. And in the end, we actually included that in the bylaws, which oftentimes might not be included. It's not necessary to include that in the bylaws, but we wanted it because it's such a core piece of this specific entity. We wanted it vested within those bylaws. And let's see, we had a lot of several other plans that or agreements that are in place but are not at that same policy level, but I'll just name a few of them because they've been really important. One has been creating an agreement on a collaborative distribution of funds model. That has, again, many months of discussions and effort looking at different models. What does equity mean when we're distributing funds is a big part of this discussion. Whether pooled funds from a grant or in the future, maybe excess operating income in the building, and how do we distribute it to the partners? You know, is it by the amount of time that we invest in the partnership? Is it by the size of the organization? Like what does equality look like when we look at distribution of funds? And so that's been a big discussion point and a process. And if anybody wants to talk to us about that, we'd love to share what we've learned and what we've created at this point. Might adapt in the future, of course. And then we have EDI vision and the EDI lens that we are working on right now that would be a cooperative agreement on how we're moving forward as an organization. So I'll just point out those, and again, a lot of other facilitated documents and policies in the works, but those are the key ones.
Thanks, Jessica. All right, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. So I think early on, and maybe even in reference to the last question, I talked about some of the partnerships that we have. I'm going to highlight 3 specific arrangements to just give folks an idea of what might be possible to develop in just a small handful of years. And these, I'm using these 3 examples to show you that our agreements span a variety of levels of formality, emerged at different times over the past 6 years, and interact with some different levels of organizations. Again, just to sort of, by no means are these the 4 corners of what's possible, but it's a pretty wide pattern. If you were shooting a shotgun, this is a pretty wide pattern. So right out of the gate, on the day that the Rogue River Watershed Council was formed, we signed a memorandum of agreement with the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District that covered a whole host of benefits, hopefully for both organizations, but certainly for the Rogue River Watershed Council, one of which gave us a home. So we are co-housed with the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District in Central Point. But aside from the co-housing arrangement and shared use of materials and supplies and some infrastructure, aside from a roof over our heads, that arrangement also provides the Rogue River Watershed Council with funding, currently on the order of about $70,000 a year, to support our staff in developing projects either with the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District or the types of projects that the SWCD would like to work on if they had the capacity to work on them. So that's a relatively large chunk of cash that we can use in a pretty unrestricted way. Those activities are obviously restricted to be in Jackson County as opposed to our operations that are in the Josephine County part of our area. But otherwise, we can use it for project development, communications work, all of those sorts of things. So really important agreement for us. I would point out that we have a similar agreement that came about just a little bit later that involves the Medford Water Commission. Same sort of deal, relatively unrestricted on how we can use it as long as it's within the Medford Water Commission source water area. The second agreement I'll talk about is with, it's not a formal agreement at all. It's not even really a handshake agreement, but it's a relationship that we have with the Wild Salmon Center. That partnership emerged in late 2017, and it came about because we're working closely with the Wild Salmon Center on a strategic action plan for coho salmon in the Upper Rogue. And as a result of our planning together and the work that we've done and the relationships that we've developed, and the promise shown by the activities that are contained within the strategic action plan for coho, the Wild Salmon Center has written us into several large funding requests that they have made to the NOAA Restoration Center and NIFWIF. And as a result, they have, and this is the best situation you can have, right? Somebody else raising money for you to do your work. Roughly $500,000 spread over 3 years, streaming to us to support our staff on development and implementation and project management, permitting, and then for construction services, contracted services. So, you know, again, $500,000 goes quite a long way on doing in-stream restoration work. And then probably the most formal, yes. Yep.
Oh, I thought you were finished. I apologize. This is Vanessa. Okay. I do have those two questions hanging out for you, and I think you've kind of half answered both of them. Do you want me to ask now?
Sure.
Okay. All right. What about collaboration with other organizations that are active in your area, such as the Freshwater Trust, synergistic in focus or duplicative?
So, you know, you're always running, again, two sides of the same coin. For those of you that haven't been to Southwest Oregon, particularly the Bear Creek drainage, it is a relatively crowded playing field. So we're always looking for opportunities to partner together, pull sharp elbows in, and not compete for projects or resources, and work together to figure out how to get the most done. And we're learning as we go. But Freshwater Trust is another organization that we have a formal relationship with to share the workload. And again, like I described earlier, figure out how to get more hands on the lemon to do the squeezing instead of trying to capture the lemon for yourself. So we have a lot of, I mean, I would say if I listed out all of the formal arrangements that we have, again, it's probably 10 or 11 agreements with different agencies, and they run from, I'll just list them off. Aside from the three that I just or the two that I just mentioned and one I'm about to mention, we've also got arrangements with the Bureau of Land Management, the City of Grants Pass, the City of Phoenix, the City of Shady Cove, Butte Falls Charter School. I already talked about Medford Water Commission, Rogue Basin Partnership, Freshwater Trust, and the U.S. Forest Service. And I might be missing somebody else. I think there's a City of Medford as well. So pretty large number, again, ranging from, Rogue Valley Council of Governments is another. So that, I don't know, that's probably up pretty close to 15. Does that get to the?
So this next question, I'm almost positive you spoke to it.
What's that?
Oh, the next one, I'm almost positive you answered it, but I'm going to ask it just in case. Is your local SWCD part of your partnership? If so, how is their specific legal requirements handled?
They are part of our partnership only to the extent that we have this memorandum of agreement. So they're not, and they have a liaison position to our board. So our arrangement is codified in a legal document with the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. There is also a Soil and Water Conservation District in Josephine County, the Two Rivers SWCD, and we work with them, but that is entirely informal.
Thanks, Brian. Any other questions, Vanessa?
That's it for now.
Okay.
I have a third agreement that I'll talk about just really briefly. No, that's fine. I'll make this short. It emerged in 2016 completely as a result of that focus that I was talking about earlier. One of the watersheds that we think is really important is the Elk Creek drainage, which is sort of near Lost Creek Lake in the northern part of Jackson County. And there is a roughly 7-mile chunk of Elk Creek that is managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have a MOU with the Department of Defense, which is a little bit frightening, but totally doable. And so that arrangement allows us to work directly with the Department of Defense on developing habitat restoration projects on their Elk Creek managed area. And it carves out specific responsibilities for each entity. So the Corps grants us access basically and handles the bulk of the permitting activities on those projects. And they sort of, obviously in coordination with them, they leave up to us the dreaming up of the projects, the fundraising, coordination, and project management.
Great, thank you.
There.
Great diversity of agreements that you all have and variety of formality. So there's obviously many different avenues people can take. And I'm watching all of you guys take notes as you hear each other talk, which is also interesting. So our last question is kind of giving, if you were giving one piece of advice to the organizations listening here or others that might be exploring organization collaboration in the future, what's the one piece of advice that you would give based on your experiences? So we're gonna go to Abby, Sydney, Brian, and then Jessica.
Okay. Oh yeah. So one piece of advice that I would give is to reach out to as many organizations and constituencies as possible at the start of the process. I think what we're doing here is really great, and I am taking notes as well and kind of listening to see what other folks have going on. But I think by reaching out to as many folks as possible, that kind of helps ensure that any issues that may come up along the way will be identified, and it won't be just huge red flags in the middle of your process. I think by reaching out to folks and chatting with everybody, it gives you access to resources too that may not have been available elsewhere. So I think, collaboration is one of our greatest resources, and reaching out, I think, would be the most beneficial for folks at the beginning.
Great. Sydney.
It's hard to choose one piece of advice, but I would say learn how to listen. Listening is so important, and not just like listening, active listening, but like listening to understand and with an open mind, so that if somebody does have a better idea than yours, you can recognize it and sort of build those collaborative solutions. And I think I would just add to that, like, leading with generosity, right? So once you understand what you want to do together, is to really put yourself out there and show that generosity. Because I think if we go into collaboration still with that mindset of scarcity and protecting what's ours, we're never going to get to that culture of abundance that Jessica was talking about. That is absolutely, I think, for us, the end goal. So yeah, I cheated and gave it to you. Sorry.
That's okay. Brian.
Yeah, so I would say something to just keep in mind is I would caution folks to not collaborate simply to collaborate. It needs to make sense. I think you'll find that it will, but be real honest with yourself and spend a little bit of time thinking about your own self-interest as an organization. What is it that you're not getting done to the degree that you would like to get it done? What would it look like for you to be hitting home runs every at bat, to use a baseball analogy? And then think through how collaborating with someone somewhere can help you make progress towards that. I can guarantee every organization that's on this call, you have something to gain from collaborating. But if you just walk in saying, I want to collaborate, the chances of you finding that thing are slim. So I don't think you can do enough homework thinking about what is it that we want to achieve as an organization. Expand that out to how do we want to play a part in making the world look different and better tomorrow, and then thinking about who you collaborate with and how to get that done. If you run through that process, it will serve you well.
Great. Jessica.
I think the three other panelists have touched on pretty much everything I was going to say. It's always good to go last, but I think the idea of listening and the abundance mindset, I'll take that to just focusing on building relationships with the partners that you are forming collaboration or just for the sake of building trust and relationship. And so we've talked about like making it fun, making it personal, these are really important and it takes time. And so building trust is just such a core piece of that. And I would also say that to trusted relationships, when you have honesty and openness along the way, when issues arise, then you can actually talk about them. And I think there's some report about collaboration, I think it was Bridgespan Group, that said from nationwide that the sole biggest reason that collaboration doesn't work, or the barriers that are identified, was that there was poor defining of partner roles in relationships. And I think that idea of being able to talk about those issues when they come up and have a safe space for that, where people feel heard and not defensive, but instead really being able to listen to one another, is so key to then moving towards impactful collaboration. So I think at the root of it, though, it starts with those trusted relationships in order to create that kind of safe space. So I think that's probably it. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you, guys. We have time for general questions. Vanessa, if there's not questions from the audience, I have a few more questions for our panelists that they don't even know about yet. So.
Surprise. There is one comment question. Let's see. It says, love the advice from everyone and the diversity of perspectives. I always appreciate a good baseball reference as well. Great questions to continue asking of our own partnership to make sure we are being our most effective selves. Thank you so much for putting this together. When you already live inside of a partnership, it is really great to hear from others and see how it is going and how they may set up differently. We can always strive to be better at what we do for conservation. So just a comment.
Thanks, Vanessa. So my question that I realized I didn't build into any of the 4 questions that we put here today is, I would really be interested in hearing from all of you about any challenges or conversations you've had to have with your boards to bring them along your collaborative journeys. Sometimes I hear from groups that reach out to me that staff might be more comfortable with it, but boards are less comfortable with venturing now down a new collaborative path for many different reasons. So wondering if any of you guys have any thoughts or ideas to share about the journeys you've had to go on with your boards related to collaboration. And before I call on any of you, I'll see if any of you wants to jump in first. Good job, Jessica.
I can, yeah, definitely. It's a great question. And a couple of things come to mind. Again, it's when I think about like the board, we've had 6 years of this. So there's kind of, different responses or there's different eras or something. But in general, a couple of takeaways that I have is, one, having at least one board liaison on the, right now the steering committee has been very helpful, because again, that person, whether they're reporting back at board meetings or not, they're there and the board knows that they're there in that capacity. And so that's been really helpful, as well as just having their perspective in the steering committee of the Confluence. We have definitely had some challenges, and I would say earlier on, especially when there were a lot more unknowns, when we didn't have all the agreements in place, we have a financial plan, we didn't have all of these things in place. When we go to our board and say, for Greenbelt Land Trust, I want us to sign a master lease on this building before it's built, and to pay a deposit to this landowner, and all that liability is going to go on Greenbelt, is a big lift to ask people for, and especially our finance committee or our treasurer, and saying, well, what does this mean? What is the liability? What is the risk? And so really, I think we just had to work through all those questions. We had to engage our legal counsel. We had to start, even at the front end, building a framework for a financial plan and what that would look like. Is it low, medium, high risk? What are the outs that we have? Just really making sure that we bring some context to the board, so that they aren't just sort of having this reaction of it's a little overwhelming, or it's too much risk to take on. And I think that as we go forward, for us forming a new nonprofit, it's not the reason that we're forming it at all, but it does move the decision making and some of the liability and risk over to the representatives from each of the organization, instead of like our own board or the board of each of our partners. And so that is, I think, a side benefit of that as well. But we do, I will say, just logistically, we do have a standing monthly board meeting at Greenbelt, and our own board has a committee report from the Confluence. Whether there's something to report on or not, it's a standing place on the agenda.
Thanks. Anyone else want to talk about conversations with their boards as you talk about collaboration?
I can talk about it from sort of a secondhand perspective, right? Because I am a shared employee of all 6 of those organizations, so I don't have a board, and the network is not an organization. It's just sort of like exists in the ether. But yeah, so boards, what I've heard is that there's there's not a lot of pushback, but there's not a lot of understanding of, okay, why should we commit resources to this? Why are we in this collaboration? And so one of the first things that we are really trying to do is demonstrate the value of the network, right? So sharing on a regular basis, every month, the EDs, they share with the board what's going on in the network, and our successes. I think since I've started, we've brought in over $600,000 in funding for our initiatives and for our organizations, which being able to say, okay, this is what we're doing and this is what we're bringing together and this is what the network brings to the table is really helping to increase buy-in, and then providing those opportunities for board members to interact with each other, and so that they get experience those benefits of collaboration, those relationship building opportunities, and really see, okay, when they do get involved, they can see kind of what the benefits are at the individual level and at the organizational level.
Thanks, Sydney.
I can go next unless Brian's ready to jump on.
Go for it.
Yeah, so through the collaborative process here in Wasco County, when the coordinating board was formed, there was a ton of changes that all happened at once. And so the beginning of the coordinating board started in 2014, and then in 2015, the original coordinator took a different position. We got a new district manager, and then I was promoted to watershed council coordinator. And so along with all of the watershed councils trying to understand the new relationship with me as the coordinator, we're also trying to figure out how to keep the uniqueness of each watershed council when OWEP says, let's produce a coordinating board to help kind of streamline the capacity process. And I think a lot of our board members, stuck their heels in the dirt and were like, whoa, wait, like, no, I don't want to do this. But the more the discussions started to kind of evolve, we realized that, this was a huge opportunity to collaborate with everyone in the county, all the watershed councils, and not just focus on your one area, out in South County. It was a chance to learn about the different projects and problems across the watershed. And so I think even though a lot of them at the start were kind of hesitant, I mean, we got to streamline a lot of the capacity grant requirements as far as doing our work plans and our annual reports and stuff. So it's not at each individual council where we're repeating this process 6 times. We got to kind of streamline it, but also everybody gets a chance to learn about what's going on in the other areas and build off of that for what they want to improve in their own council. So I think with the collaborative journey and going down this new path, I think a lot of folks were hesitant at first, but now it's a huge resource for the coordinating board members to develop these relationships across watershed lines.
Great, thanks. Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, the example I'm going to bring up maybe sort of ties into what Abby was just talking about and flipping it, looking at it from a different perspective. I think one of the largest discussion points that cropped up during the merger process was the distribution of unrestricted funds that each of the merging councils sort of had in their bank account. And the carefully crafted, I'm sure there was tons of conversation and argument that went into the ultimate result, but it proves that something can happen. Clearly, not all of the groups thought the same way about what to do with unrestricted funds. And so the negotiated arrangement ended up being that a couple of the merging councils were able to create sort of a pot of funding that they funded through some distribution of their unrestricted funds at the time of merger to be used in some restricted way. So for example, both the Bear Creek Watershed Council and the Little Butte Creek Watershed Council established what we call dedicated funding pots, where their unrestricted funds went to those pots, and the Rogue River Watershed Council needs to use that money within either the Bear Creek area or the Little Butte Creek area on projects that folks that represent those communities approve of. So they were able to carve out a way to handle the concern. I can't speak to what the concerns are if I had to guess, I would say it was something along the lines of, clearly this money came from people to work on these particular areas, and we want to make sure that the funding gets used in that way. And it's obvious that you want to fully support that. Anyhow, the board members or the merging council figured out a way how to make that happen.
Hey, Courtney.
Yeah.
Just one thing that I'm like, why didn't I say that too? Where you're just like afterwards. But just one thing that has been from the board level of each of the partners, the opportunity to meet the other board members and to start to build relationships has been amazing. And we are in the process of a 2-year, all the organizations facilitated EDI process and equity, diversity, and inclusion. And tomorrow we have our 3rd series of trainings where we have almost all day, where we have all the board and staff of all of the Confluence partners together on Zoom. It's going to be in person, of course. But I think that opportunity to not just have our board members understand what's going on, but to actually see and learn from the other board members and just build friendships and relationship is so cool. And it's been one of those things that has really blossomed and led to all other kinds of opportunities. But that's another just piece on that I think is a huge benefit that is hopefully we'll explore more and more.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. I laugh sometimes as I hear Brian talk about the merger, because I was intimately involved in a lot of the logistics behind that, including convincing our fiscal people to pay for all the food that was needed for each meeting so that people's mouths stayed full so the facilitator could talk.
This is Vanessa. I'm going to jump in. There's another question that came in. It says, if you have partner organizations with greatly different levels of funding, how are shared costs portioned out?
Anyone? Sydney, don't you guys have a good example of that with the land trust and some of the work you guys did?
Yeah, so we have 6 organizations, some with a staff of 3 and some with a staff of 15. We have wildly different budgets and resources available. And so we've tried a few different approaches. One of which is when we're joint fundraising, to really look at, okay, who is going to be spending the time doing this, and making sure that they are receiving the funds that sort of correspond to that level of effort. Another thing that we do is we ask organizations that have more resources, like Mackenzie River Trust, to pitch in a little bit more in kind. If we want their staff to participate, for example, they have a lot of knowledge and expertise in outreach and communications and fundraising, and so we call on them to, support the network with the resources that they have. And so we try to really balance, what people. We do this thing called gives, gets, and constraints, which I think is really great, where we talk about, okay, this is what I can give to the partnership. This is what I really want to get from the partnership, and these are the constraints on what I can do. So that's sort of how we try to take it on a case-by-case basis and really figure out what works for people. You guys all disappeared, so I don't know what's going on anymore.
We still hear you, but you pop in and out at times.
Yeah, does that answer the question?
That's great. Looks like we've got just about 7 minutes left. Any other questions coming in, Vanessa?
No other questions, but I do have a couple of things to say at the very end, so I'll protect maybe 3 minutes at the end.
I guess I would just say, if any of the panelists have any closing comments, I just want to say thank you guys all for your just really honest answers. I learned a lot, and I'm just passionate about this work, and I'm just really appreciative of all the great things you guys are each doing in your communities and your unique approaches, because I think what I really wanted to highlight today is what I say verbally all the time, but you guys demonstrated, is there's no cookie cutter approach to collaboration in any community. It's really based on where you are, where you want to go, and how you want to work with your partners and the agreements that you can find. And it was just great to hear you guys really talk honestly about each of those different approaches and how they're working. Because as a funder, I see the successes that you guys are all achieving in your unique ways, and it's really amazing work. And you're doing amazing work collectively and for the resources on the ground, and I really appreciate all of your efforts. So I guess, Vanessa, if there's no other questions, turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, I'm going to turn on my webcam here so you can actually see me. Okay. Here I am. Hi, everybody. I just want to say thanks again to the audience and to the panelists for joining us. And panelists, thank you for contributing your expertise and your opinions and perspectives. And Courtney, thank you for being our fearless facilitator here in the remote world. And a couple things. I want to give everyone a heads up about our next webinar. It will be December 10th at 2 o'clock from 2 to 3:30, and we are going to feature Julie Harvey from DEQ, and the topic is going to be drinking water providers partnerships. We'll feature Julie and then also a small panel of councils, districts, and land trusts. And I also wanted to let you know, this is some breaking news from the Oregon Conservation Partnership. We reconfigured our grant a little bit and we got some new deliverables. And one of those is that we will be coordinating the formation of 5 new affinity groups. This news goes out to all of those councils, districts, and land trusts in the audience. So in the next few days, we'll be sending out a survey and we're going to be asking your opinion about if there were new affinity groups, what types of focuses would you want to have included in those numbers and why? And they could really break out lots of different ways, but one of the thoughts we have is that we could have groups on topics that would bring regional councils, districts, and land trusts together, similar to some of the formations that you're seeing here. So if you were inspired and you want to start your own, I think that we can create a dedicated time and space to do that. We can also do focuses around technical things. So if there's restoration or conservation things that you have in common and feel like you'd like to regularly meet and learn from one another, we can do that. And maybe we could also focus on things having to do with fundraising or diversity, equity, and inclusion as they relate to conservation restoration work on the ground. So we will be sending the SurveyMonkey survey out to the coordinators and directors only of each council, district, and land trust. So directors, keep your eye out for that. And that's so that we only get one response back from each organization. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks everyone.
Thank you guys all again, and everyone have a great day, and nice to see all of you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Woohoo! All right.